Okay, this is an updated video from the one I did a year and a half ago. I took apart the power blower again, and just to check the bearings and see how things were going. I repacked the bearings and also did some work on the idler pulleys that were also needing grease. I popped the seals out and put new grease in those too. Please check the video. You can see some tricks and tips that I did on this video that I probably didn't do in the last one. But the power blower is expensive, almost $1,000, so it's good to do this at least once a year. I'd probably do it. Don't let it go more than a year and a half, but it needs some work. It gets a lot of abuse. And yes, sometimes I blow water through there from the hose just to clean it out, but inadvertently you use this on wet grass and it packs it up with loads it up with a lot of dirt and debris. So this needs to be done. Please leave a like if you like this video, and if you learned something, or leave me a comment if you didn't learn something. But definitely is a good idea to do this maintenance. This is my idea, nobody else's. John Deere probably has a different way of doing it. Thank you very much.
Okay, once you have the deck off, you can surely take the Powerflo off first, which most of the time I do, but I wanted to show you how the belt works. The belt just rides on this top pulley here on top of this one, which actually does two things. It drives the Powerflo and also keeps it in drive mode. So when you pull this back and let it go forward, it releases the belt, which allows you to take it off the pulley. I always tie it on here so it doesn't get caught up. Then you can just easily drag it out on the arm like this, so it's easy access. Now what I do, after I get it in this point on the tractor or off the tractor, I just lift this up very carefully off the pin and set this down so it's out of the way. Then I take this part here and put it in my vise to make it easy to work on. It gives me a working surface. That's what I always do. Simple, simple. So, my vise has this attachment on it. It's a pipe vise, so I can lock this in place here. Then I'll just take my Powerflo and just put it just like it was on the deck. Mount it right there. Now I have easy access to working on it. Makes it real simple. I can turn it any angle I want. So we're going to take the guard off and pull the belt off first. So that's our first step. So at first, you take out the pins here. I have an extra bolt here, a pin here. Take out the bolts here and take out the bolts here. 10 millimeter. And pop this bolt out. Then it's easy just to lift this out. If it's pull it up over this handle, and you can remove this guard. This guard is just to protect all this from your fingers and everything, so it stays safe. Then what I do is I loosen up this bolt here, which I already did, so to save time on the video. And you can take this belt right out of here, off of the hook, pull this belt right out of this bracket, and take it right out of here, out of this whole thing, and pull it off. Now this bracket here has to loosen up this too. Let me loosen that up real quick. And this is just a guard to keep the belt on. There it comes. The belt's off. So then you can put this belt over here, and there it is. There's your top pulley, your bottom pulley. And when you tighten this up, it puts tension on the belts and tightens this to the tractor deck, and also at the same time this tension here locks this in place. So that's how you get this tension on the belt, and it just goes like this and locks in place. So when you want to loosen the belt, you loosen this, which allows these pulleys to come forward inside the guard, and this one doesn't move, but this one does, and keeps you, makes the tension on the belt. That's what we have to do. So now you can see that the blower is off the deck. Here's the pin, that, or the bracket that holds the pin, the swing arm, and this is the cover that one day caught the belt and cut through a little bit, but that's no big deal. There's the top pulley. It just slides over the top like that, keeps it in place. Now what I'm going to do after I took the guard off is I'm going to cut this little tie wrap that holds it on the main shaft and take this bolt that I added, a nut and bolt to keep this tight. It was loose before, and take this whole cover off around, take all these bolts out so I can get to the blade and see what it looks like. Okay, in order to get that cover off, after you remove the front guard, the side guard, and the belt, there's 8 of these screw-in bolts. That's 8mm speed handle, and 4 of these plow bolts that are inside, and 2 bracket bolts. These bolts are all on the side of this thing, all the way around. You'll see them here, all the way around. Don't try to pull it apart until you take all these parts off. These bolts here and here, these are a guard inside. You got to get these bolts out, at least half of them, so you can pull this apart. Once you get it apart, there's 2 dowel pins. There's a dowel pin here and a dowel pin here that has to come straight out. So you'll see when you get ready. I'll show you in a minute. Okay, once you get all the bolts out, the ones on the outside over here and the ones that are on the guard in here, there's 4 plow bolts that are in here. You have to reach inside and get the plow bolt out after you take the nut off. Then there's 2 dowel pins, one here and one here. You knock those out, and this will all come apart. After you do that, you might need a screwdriver to pry this apart a little bit here. That'll take that off. Then you can just, this is all full of dirt. Okay, so before I get any further, I'm going to take these guards off, because inside these guards is a ton of grass caught up in here. I mean, I sprayed most of it out. It's all down here on the floor. It's just caked on so bad that it doesn't really hurt anything, but like I say, what happens is once you get these plow bolts out of here, get them loose, it's not a big deal. 5 more minutes to take these off. These are just guards, and all that grass stays in there and rusts this guard out. Pretty soon you got to replace it. So it's pretty easy to do that. You just, the plow bolts fit right in. There's nothing to them. They're 10mm nuts. Take these off, and it's very easy to clean all this out of here. Once you take them out, see, this is just caked with grass and sand and dirt and whatever in your yard. And you can save these guards. It's probably not expensive, but why replace them if you can just use them again? So it's not that big a deal. They're almost exactly the same. The bottom one's a little bit shorter. Not really. They're basically the same. They're the same. So you can mix them up. Won't matter. Put the bolts back in when you put it back together. But now you can clean this all out. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to take this bolt loose, 13mm, right here on the pulley. You hold it with 2 wrenches. Take this bolt out. As a washer, a thick washer, so pay attention. When you take this pulley off, you got to be careful. There's a keyway right here. You got to be sure you don't lose that keyway. It's right here, and it'll come out. I have to hit it with something. Let me do that in a minute, and I'll show you the rest of the video. Okay, so once you get the pulley off, don't lose the little key. Here's the key. Keep in touch. Don't lose the washer, the key. Then when you get to this thing, you can pull the fan right out. This thing swivels on here like this. The pulley's off. There's a washer here. So when you pull the shaft out, don't lose the washer. It's right here. Oh no, sorry, there's no washer on this side, it's on this side. Sorry about that. Here's the washer here. You don't want to lose this washer. You can pull the shaft right out of here. It comes right out, see? This comes out. The washer's right here. This goes between here and here. All this is caked up. All this is caked up. You want to get all that dirt out of there. You can clean it all up. Don't lose this key. There's a key on this side too, and the washer. Pay attention, don't lose it. Okay? That's the way it has to go. One way only. Okay, I made a video last year about this, but just wanted to see. This has been in the whole season. I've never taken this apart since I greased it and put it together last winter, or about a year ago. So what you can do is take the shaft that came out of the blower fan, or yeah, the fan blade, clean it off a little bit, put it right in here inside this bearing, wiggle it around, and it'll walk this bearing right out. You can push it from the other side if you want. It'll push this right out of here. See there? There's the bearing. And it needs grease. It doesn't need grease right now, but it used up a lot of grease. Now remember, inside here, there's a spacer between the two bearings. Don't lose it. Don't forget to put it back. Now what I did last year, I told you I busted the seals off the inside of both bearings so that I could get the other bearing now. You just pop it out and the bearing comes right out just like this. And you see there's a seal on this side but none on this side. So in between the two bearings, they're on there like this, there's a spacer, and this area gets filled with grease. I packed this with grease. And it still has grease in it, so it made it throughout the year. But the hot summer days, it melted some of it out. So there you go. It's ready for more grease, and I saved those bearings. I do not have to replace them this year. Just have to pack new grease in there, which I'm going to do now. So what I do is I use some of this Super Blue high temperature grease. You probably can use any grease you want. Pack the bearing really good, and pack the other bearing really good. Then I shove the bearing in the hole from the back side, because there's a spacer in the middle on the hub. Put the bearing in the hole on the other side, and then I take my shaft, shove it through the hole with all the grease in between the two bearings. Then I put the spacer on so it stays center, and then I put this bearing with the seal out. The seal on the other side is taken out, and it lines on the shaft. Now the inside's full of grease, so when I push this in, the housing, hold the other bearing, when I push it in, it packs the tight, really tight. So it actually packs the bearing with grease. Almost too much grease. But you can't get too much grease. And you just keep pushing on it, and it'll ooze out everywhere, which is fine. And you just keep pushing it, pushing it, pushing it, and it'll ooze out both sides. And eventually it'll be all in there. The bearing's in with no dirt in it, and this side's of course also packed with grease because the bearing's on this side also, and the shaft's in the middle holding the spacer in place. So it's pretty easy, and that's what you want to do. Then you got to clean all the grease off your hands, of course. It's kind of messy, but that bearing is packed inside and out, so you can't get any dirt in it, and it's ready for next year for a whole season, definitely. You can get very crazy cleaning this whole area, but you think about it, you're going to get some grass in here. This pumps grass through all the time you cut. The first time you cut the grass with a little dampness, it's going to have some buildup. But don't forget to put this spacer in. This spacer has to go in, and then don't forget to put the key in. The key goes on, the long key goes on the side with the fan, and the short key goes on the pulley side. So you got the bolt and the washer, the pulley, the key, the shaft, and then the shaft comes through with a washer, then the fan blade, But I still have to clean that up, so I'm working on that now. So just remember, the bearings are packed, they're good for the year, so we don't have to worry about it all summer long. From now on, we can store this for the winter and be confident that it's not going to rust and the bearings are good. We checked the bearings, they're in perfect condition because we did this last year. So this will be my second time on this blower. Just another little tip. I put the fan back on with the, don't forget the washer and the key, put the bolts in, put two 13/16 wrenches and twist them together like this and make this tight so this spins freely on the bearing. But these guards, if you notice, there's a slot, very little slight slot, not very much, but there's a slot. So when you put the plow bolts in the slot, they have a little bit of movement. You want to make sure these are tight against the back and this side when you tighten them up. So what I do is I put them in and get them as tight as I can, snug on both sides. And when I put the other side on, I reach inside. Just make sure, I mean, this fan's not going to hit them, but you want the clearance to be as less as possible. See how this moves? Because it fills up with debris. So you try to get the slot back so that this is tight against the back side of the housing. Not that it matters much, but it's just another little pointer. So keep in mind when you go to put it back together. The fan's back in, the two guards are in place. I'm getting ready to put the cover back on and put all the bolts in loosely. Push the guards back home this way, because there's two pieces. The gaps in the middle, doesn't matter. What are you going to do about it? And what I always put, a little silicone here, a little silicone here, and a little here, just to keep the fan from pumping the grass in underneath there that fills this gap with grass. And again, it doesn't hurt anything. It just keeps dampness in there, and it'll cause these to rust. But they're in good shape because I did this last year. So if you take it apart every year, you should be fine. Let's go from there. Thank you. Okay, this is probably a little weird, but this is the pulley that goes on the blower on the outside. It's the tracker of the. What I did was took a poker and pried open the bearing seal, and then I took my finger and I stuffed grease down inside like that, all a bunch of grease, just stuffed it, and then I just took my screwdriver and bent the cover down as good as I could. It's not perfect, that's for sure, but this bearing is on here. You see where I packed the grease through? It came through the other side. I just kept pushing grease real hard into that crack, into that little split. Just pumped it, and it turned it, and now it's free. It wasn't dry, but it wasn't perfect. So now it spins nice and free, and there's grease on it. So I'm going to reinstall this, but this is a bearing that's put together, then this is welded in place. So it's a replacement part, one-time grease. If you don't grease it, it will fail, and when it fails, it'll tear up the belt. And I just bought a belt. This is the old belt. I just bought a new belt, and it was $60. So this is probably a $30 part. So it's like $100 if this bearing goes bad. So it's worth it to break the seal a little bit. This is a rubber plastic seal, and push grease in it. I'm going to point that to the down position so water won't get to it, and we should be fine. At least it's got grease, better than not having grease. So, and that goes right there on the end of there. It sits right on this shaft. So I'm going to put the part that I made the hole in at the bottom and put this back in where it goes, with the bottom pulley. Put the cover back on. It has a cover anyway, so it doesn't really get much water, but it could when it's running. So that's just another pointer. It's up to you.
Okay, I just wanted to make a little quick note that I did pull both of the idler pulleys off, and both of them have sealed bearings. I put a hole in one and popped one off so that I could put grease in the bearings. They were not dry, but they were not spinning freely, so I basically cleaned them out and pumped grease in with my finger and filled the one up, and the other one I just took the cover right off of the seal and I packed it with grease and put the cover back on. No big deal, but at least they have grease now, and definitely good for another season for sure. I don't have to buy new bearings.
So everything seems to go back together. All these bolts going back in. All these bolts are going back in. There's a bunch of them. Then I gotta put the new belt on. So this works really good, having this on the vise like this. Makes a nice workbench. Everything's going back in. Put the bolts in. Clean it all up.